The afternoon was warm, and the streets were busy with people rushing home from work and school. Cars honked, children laughed in the distance, and shopkeepers pulled down their shutters. In the middle of all that noise, a young black boy noticed something strange. An old man stood on the corner of the road, turning his head left and right, as if the world around him didn't make sense anymore. His clothes were neat but wrinkled, and his eyes looked lost, almost frightened. People walked past him without stopping, some glancing at him briefly, others not caring at all. The boy slowed his steps. Something about the old man tugged at his heart. He could see the man mumbling words to himself, but they were broken, scattered, like pieces of a puzzle that no longer fit. The boy wondered if the man was sick, or maybe just forgotten by someone. He looked around, expecting to see a relative or a friend coming to help, but no one seemed to know him. The boy hesitated. He was small, and the world had often told him he had little to offer. But there was a warmth inside him, a voice that said he couldn't just walk away. He took a deep breath and stepped closer. "Sir, are you okay?" he asked gently. The old man looked at him, his eyes wide and wet. For a moment, he seemed about to speak clearly, but then he stammered, I was, where is?" His voice broke. His hands trembled. He looked down at his shoes as though searching for the answer. The boy realized the man didn't know where he was or what he was supposed to do. His heart sank. It was painful to see someone so vulnerable, so unsure, in the middle of a crowd that didn't care. The boy held out his hand, small and steady. "Don't worry," he whispered. "I won't leave you." The old man stared at the hand for a while, then slowly placed his own shaking fingers into it. That simple touch carried a whole world of comfort. The boy could feel how cold his hand was, how fragile his skin had become with age. The man squeezed his hand lightly, as if holding onto the last piece of trust left in him. Around them, people still moved as if nothing had happened. A group of teenagers laughed and pointed, whispering something cruel about the old man. The boy felt a sting in his chest, but ignored them. He guided the man toward a bench nearby, helping him sit down. Before he could stumble, the man sighed heavily, like a child finally safe after being lost for too long. The boy sat beside him, waiting quietly. After a while, he tried again. "Do you remember your house? Or your family?" But the man only shook his head, his lips quivering. He began muttering names, none of them making sense. At one point, he grew restless, as though he wanted to get up and walk away, but the boy kept his hand on his arm and said softly, "Stay here with me. You're not alone." The kindness in his voice calmed the man a little. He blinked, looking at the boy like he was someone familiar, someone safe. Maybe in that moment, the boy was a reminder of his own son or grandson, someone from a past he could no longer fully remember. The sun began to lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The boy's stomach rumbled quietly. He hadn't eaten since lunch. Still, he stayed. The old man needed him more than he needed food. He bought a small bottle of water from a nearby shop and handed it over. The man held it clumsily, spilling some as he drank, but the boy only smiled and said, "It's okay, drink slowly." That smile worked like magic. For the first time, the old man's shoulders relaxed. He leaned back against the bench, looking tired but less afraid. The boy watched him carefully, worried he might wander off again. He thought of what might have happened if he hadn't stopped. Perhaps the man would have walked into the street, or collapsed from exhaustion. The thought made his chest tighten. The street grew quieter as evening approached. Most of the crowd had gone home, but still no one came looking for the old man. The boy wondered who he belonged to. Did he have children? Did he have a wife waiting at home, worried sick? Or was he truly alone in the world? The boy didn't know, but one thing was clear. Leaving him there was not an option. He thought about his own small home, the simple meals his mother prepared, The laughter he shared with his siblings even when they didn't have much. He imagined what it would feel like if one day his grandfather wandered out and no one cared enough to help. That thought gave him strength. The boy stood up and said, "Come with me. I'll take care of you until we find your home." The old man looked at him, confused but trusting. With slow steps, they began walking together, hand in hand, the boy leading and the man following. Neighbors looked on, surprised to see such a young child guiding an old man through the narrow lanes. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered that it wasn't safe to bring strangers home. But the boy ignored them all. He knew deep down that what he was doing was right. And so, the night began with an unlikely pair. A boy with nothing but kindness to give, and an old man with fading memories, clinging to the one person who chose to see him not as a burden, but as a human being worth helping. The world outside might have turned its back, but in that quiet walk home, a bond of trust was born, one that neither of them knew would soon change both their lives forever. The boy guided the old man slowly down the street, his small hand gripping the frail one tightly so he would not stumble or get lost again. The evening breeze had grown cooler, carrying with it the smell of bread from a nearby bakery and smoke from small food stalls. The old man looked around in confusion, as if every sound and smell belonged to another world. His lips trembled as he whispered things that did not make sense, half names, broken phrases, and words swallowed by silence. The boy could see the fear in his eyes, the same kind of fear a child has when waking from a nightmare. They stopped by a corner store, hoping someone might recognize him. The boy asked the shopkeeper, "Do you know this man? He seems lost." The shopkeeper barely glanced at them before shaking his head impatiently. "He's always wandering around. He forgets where he is. Take him away before he causes trouble." His words were sharp, carrying no sympathy. The boy's chest tightened, but he said nothing. He only helped the man sit down on a wooden crate near the store and gave him another sip of water. Passers-by kept staring, whispering to each other. Some shook their heads, muttering that the old man should be locked away somewhere. Others laughed cruelly, mocking his trembling hands and vacant eyes. The boy felt their eyes burn into him, but he ignored them. In his heart, he knew what he was doing was right. If no one else cared, then he would. The old man began fidgeting suddenly, as if he wanted to stand and walk away again. He looked frightened, searching for something unseen. The boy gently placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "It's okay. You're safe here. I'll stay with you." His voice was steady and soft, carrying warmth that words alone could not describe. The man blinked, breathing unevenly, but then leaned against the wall beside him, calming down little by little. The boy thought of his own small family. They didn't have much, sometimes only enough food for one good meal a day. But they had love, patience, and care. He wondered why others could not offer the same. Why was it so hard for people to see that this man needed help, not rejection? He remembered his mother's words, "Kindness doesn't cost anything, but it can mean everything to someone else." Time passed slowly. The boy's stomach rumbled, but he stayed put, keeping his eyes on the old man. After a while, the man grew restless again, whispering something about needing to go home. But when the boy asked where his home was, he only shook his head, tears welling up in his tired eyes. Seeing that sadness, the boy felt his heart ache. "Don't cry," he said softly. "We'll find your home, I promise." He stood up and helped the old man to his feet. Together, they walked carefully through the narrow lanes. At one crossing, the boy noticed the man struggling to keep balance. Without hesitation, he wrapped his small arm around him, steadying his steps. Cars honked, but he guided him across slowly, making sure he didn't fall. Drivers grumbled impatiently, but the boy focused only on keeping the man safe. They stopped again in front of another shop. The boy asked the people inside if they knew The old man. Some shrugged, others avoided eye contact, pretending they hadn't heard. Finally, one woman said, "He has that sickness. The one that makes you forget. Better not get involved. He's not your problem." The boy's hands curled into fists at her words, but he remained calm. "He's not a problem," the boy replied quietly. "He's a person." Those simple words surprised even him. He didn't often speak so boldly, but something inside made him defend the old man. Perhaps it was the unfairness, or perhaps it was just love. The sky had now turned darker, and the streetlights began to flicker on. The boy realized he could not keep wandering like this forever. He had to make a choice, either leave the man behind, like everyone else had, or take him somewhere safe. He looked at the man, who now seemed exhausted, his head drooping as though the weight of the day had drained all his strength. The boy sighed softly, then whispered, "Come with me. I'll take care of you tonight." The old man looked at him with blank eyes, but something in that gaze softened. He nodded slowly, as if trusting the boy without understanding why. Together, they walked toward the boy's humble home. The streets were almost empty now, quiet except for the distant barking of dogs. The boy's heart pounded with worry. He didn't know what his family would say when he brought home a stranger, but he knew he couldn't abandon the old man now. He had chosen to help, and he would see it through by the time they reached the boy's house. The old man was leaning heavily on him, his steps weak. The boy's mother opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise at the sight. For a moment, she said nothing, just looking at her son, then at the frail man beside him. The boy's voice shook, but he explained softly, he was lost. Nobody wanted to help. Can we let him stay? The mother stared at them in silence, then her expression softened. Without a word, she stepped aside, letting them both in. The boy guided the old man inside, his heart filling with relief. At least, for tonight, the man would be safe, warm, and cared for. What neither of them knew was that this small act of kindness was only the beginning. Something was already on its way, something that would soon arrive at their door and change everything forever. The old man sat quietly on the small wooden chair inside the boy's home, his tired eyes wandering over the walls and the dim light of the single bulb above. His clothes were still neat, but his face carried the look of someone who had walked too far, someone who had been searching without even knowing what he was searching for. The boy stood near him, watching carefully, making sure he didn't feel lost again. His mother, though surprised, placed a small bowl of warm food on the table. She didn't ask many questions. Instead, she simply whispered to her son, "Sit him down, let him eat." The boy nodded, helping the man lift the spoon. At first the old man's hands trembled so much that the food spilled, but the boy steadied his grip and said softly, "Don't worry, I'll help you." Piece by piece, the man ate, and with every bite, his body seemed to calm a little more. The boy's younger siblings peeked from behind the doorway, whispering to each other. They had never seen a stranger inside their home, especially someone who looked so lost. But when the boys smiled at them, they understood this was not a danger, but someone who needed love. Slowly, they stepped inside, curious. One of them offered a small piece of bread, placing it gently into the old man's hands. The man looked at the bread as if it was something precious, something he had been waiting for all day. When he finished eating, his shoulders sank with relief. He leaned back, letting out a deep sigh, his eyes blinking slowly. For a few moments, it looked like he might fall asleep right there at the table. The boy's mother placed a blanket over his shoulders. "He must be tired," she said softly. "We'll let him rest tonight." The boy nodded, but he couldn't stop thinking about the day. He remembered how people on the street had turned away, whispering that the man was a problem. Yet here he was, safe and warm, just because someone cared enough to stop. The boy's heart felt heavy and proud at the same time. Heavy because the world could be so cold, proud because he had not walked away, Later that evening, as the house grew quiet, the old man suddenly began to cry. His voice cracked as he whispered names. No one in the house recognized. He clutched his head, shaking it, as though trying to remember something important that kept slipping away. The boy hurried to his side, placing his small hand on the man's arm. "It's okay," he whispered, his voice steady and soft. "You're safe here. Don't be afraid." The old man looked at him through teary eyes, his lips trembling. For a moment, it seemed like he recognized the boy as someone familiar, maybe a son, maybe a grandson from long ago. His tears slowed, and he held the boy's hand tightly, as if it was the only thing keeping him grounded in the present moment. The boy stayed beside him until he calmed down again. Night fell deeper. The house was silent except for the sound of crickets outside. The boy lay on his thin mattress but couldn't sleep. His mind replayed the events of the day, the man's trembling hands, the cruel stares of strangers, the kindness his family had shown without asking for anything in return. He wondered who the old man really was. Did he have children? Was someone searching for him right now, panicked and worried? Or had the world simply forgotten him? The boy didn't know the answers, but one thing was clear. He couldn't let the man face the streets again. Tomorrow, he decided, he would try harder to find someone who knew him. But tonight, the man would not be alone. Tonight, he would rest. Under a roof, with warmth, food, and people who cared. Just before sleep took him, the boy thought about something his teacher had once said. Greatness is not about wealth or power. It's about what you do. No one is watching. The boy smiled faintly in the darkness. He hadn't done this for a reward. He had done it because it was right. But still, in the back of his mind, a question lingered. What would happen next? Outside, the street was quiet, the lamps glowing dimly in the night air. The boy didn't know that somewhere not far away, a family was searching desperately. They had lost someone precious, someone they feared they might never find again. And soon, their search would lead them down this very road, toward this small home where kindness had given shelter. The boy drifted into sleep, unaware that tomorrow would bring a surprise that would change his life forever. The night had been quiet in the small house. The old man slept on a mattress laid out in the corner, wrapped in a blanket the boy's mother had given him. His breathing was steady, and though his face still carried lines of confusion, for the first time that day, there was peace. The boy woke early the next morning, rubbing his tired eyes. He had hardly slept, too busy listening for any sound that might mean the old man needed him. The sun rose slowly, spilling golden light into the small room. The boy helped his mother prepare a simple breakfast, and then carefully guided the old man to eat. Though his hands still shook, he smiled faintly each time the boy encouraged him. That smile filled the boy's chest with warmth. But while the boy's house was calm, the world outside was not. Somewhere across town, a family had been searching frantically all night. The old man's children had discovered his disappearance and feared the worst. They had alerted neighbors, called friends, and driven through streets with headlights cutting the dark. By morning, their worry had grown into desperation. And finally, a phone call from someone who had seen an old man with a child guided them to the right part of the neighborhood. Late in the afternoon, as the boy was sweeping the small yard outside his home, a deep sound echoed through the narrow lane. The rumble of an engine unlike the old cars his neighbors drove. He paused, the broom still in his hands, as a shiny black luxury car turned into the street. Its polished surface reflected the sun, almost blinding. The boy's heart thudded in his chest. He had never seen a car like that so close. Neighbors poked their heads out of windows and doorways, whispering in surprise. Children ran to the roadside, pointing and gasping. The car slowed, then came to a stop right in front of the boy's house. Its doors opened with a soft click, and two people stepped out, A man in a sharp suit and a woman with tears already streaming down her face. Their eyes darted around until they saw him. The boy froze, clutching the broom tightly. For a moment, he wondered if he had done something wrong. Why would such important-looking people stop here? Then the woman's gaze moved past him, through the doorway where the old man was sitting with a blanket around his shoulders. Her lips parted, and a cry escaped her. "Father!" she shouted, running forward. The boy stepped back in shock as she rushed into the house. The man followed quickly, his face pale with worry, his steps urgent. Inside, the old man looked up at the sound of her voice. His eyes flickered with confusion, but when she fell to her knees and wrapped her arms around him, something softened. In his expression, he touched her hair gently, as though he recognized a memory struggling to return. The woman sobbed, holding him tightly. The man in the suit placed a trembling hand on his father's shoulder, his voice breaking as he said, "We thought we lost you." The boy stood silently at the doorway, his chest heavy with emotion. He had guessed the old man had a family somewhere, but seeing the reunion unfold before him was different. This was no stranger, he was someone deeply loved, someone whose absence had broken hearts. After a few moments, the woman turned to the boy, her eyes still wet. She stood slowly and walked toward him. Without warning, she bent down and pulled him into a hug. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You don't know what you've done for us." The boy's face grew warm. He didn't know what to say, so he simply nodded. The man in the suit joined her, his eyes serious but kind. "Son, you kept him safe when no one else would. We owe you more than we can ever repay." Outside, the neighbors gathered in amazement, whispering louder now. The sight of such a grand car outside the boy's small home was a story in itself. But none of them knew the full truth that inside, a bond of kindness and gratitude was being sealed forever. The old man's children insisted on helping the boy's family immediately, but the boy's mother shook her head humbly. "We only did what was right," she said. Yet the visitors were determined. They promised this kindness would not be forgotten. The boy looked at the old man one last time before he was guided gently toward the car. Their eyes met, and though the man's memory was fragile, something in his tired smile said he remembered the boy's warmth, if not his name. As the luxury car door closed and the engine started again, the boy stood on the dirt road, the broom still in his hand, his heart pounding with questions. He didn't know what their words meant when they promised not to forget him. He didn't know what was coming next, but deep down, he felt something shift. His small act of kindness had reached farther than he could have imagined. And though he had expected nothing in return, something told him this was only the beginning of a change that would soon arrive at his door again, this time carrying a gift beyond anything he had dreamed of. The boy stood outside his small home, watching as the black luxury car disappeared down the narrow road. The dust rose slowly in the air before settling back onto the ground, leaving the lane quiet again. Neighbors still whispered to each other, amazed at what they had just seen. The boy, however, only felt a mix of relief and sadness. He was glad the old man was back with his family, but the house suddenly felt emptier without him. That night, the boy lay on his bed thinking about the last few days. He could still see the old man's tired eyes, hear the trembling voice calling out names, and feel the weight of his frail hand in his own. He had not expected anything in return when he helped him. He had only wanted to make sure the man wasn't alone. But now, as he stared at the roof above him, he wondered if he would ever see him again. Morning came quietly. The boy went about his day as usual, helping his mother and playing with his siblings. Life returned to its normal rhythm. But in the back of his mind, he couldn't stop replaying the moment the old man's daughter had hugged him with tears. In her eyes, her words still echoed, "We won't forget what you did." A week passed. Then one afternoon, as the boy was fetching water outside, the familiar sound of an engine rumbled down the street again. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be? He dropped the bucket and turned quickly toward the road. The same black luxury car pulled up in front of his home. This time, the neighbors didn't just whisper. They rushed outside, curious and wide-eyed. The car door opened, and the well-dressed man and woman stepped out once again. Their faces were calmer now, but filled with warmth. The boy froze, his heart racing. Why had they come back? The woman smiled as she approached, carrying a small wrapped package in her hands. She bent down to meet the boy's eyes. "We told you we wouldn't forget," she said softly. "And we meant it." Behind her, the man stepped forward. His voice was steady, but it carried emotion. "Our father has been talking about you every day. Even when his memory fades, he remembers your kindness. He remembers that a young boy held his hand when no one else would." The boy's mother appeared at the door, surprised to see them again. She greeted them politely, but the visitors shook their heads, insisting she didn't need to be formal. The man looked around the small home, his eyes thoughtful, then back at the boy. "You may think what you did was small, but to us, it was everything. You gave our father safety when he could have been in danger. You gave him comfort when the world turned away. We want to do something for you." The boy shook his head quickly. "I didn't do it for a reward," he said softly, almost embarrassed. "I just didn't want him to be alone." The woman's eyes glistened with tears. She placed the package in his hands. "That's exactly why you deserve this." Slowly, the boy unwrapped it. Inside was a brand new school bag, filled with books, pencils, and notebooks. On top of it lay a small envelope. He opened it carefully and saw money inside, more than his family had ever held at one time. His hands trembled. He looked up, confused. Man explained gently, "This is not payment. This is an opportunity. We want you to continue your education, to have a future where your kindness can reach even farther. My father believes you are meant for something greater, and so do we." The boy's mother covered her mouth in shock, her eyes filling with tears. She had struggled for years to keep her children in school, often worrying if they could afford the next month's fees. This gift meant more than words could express. The boy's lips parted, but no sound came out. He didn't know how to thank them. His heart pounded, overwhelmed by gratitude. The woman placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "Sometimes when you give without expecting anything, life has a way of giving back in ways you never imagined." The neighbors watched in awe, some whispering about how the boy's life had suddenly changed. But the boy wasn't thinking about what others said. He was thinking about the old man, the lost stranger who had walked into his life, and how one simple choice to stop and help had brought all of this. As the luxury car drove away once again, the boy held the school bag tightly against his chest. It wasn't just about books or money. It was a reminder that kindness mattered, that even in a world where people often turned away, choosing to care could bring light into someone else's darkness. That night, before sleeping, the boy whispered quietly to himself, "Good deeds never go unnoticed." He closed his eyes with a smile, knowing his life would never be the same again.